Hello and welcome to Ask an Expert. We are so happy to have you here with us today. We have a very special guest, Rachell Hathaway. I am really honored to have her with us today. And if you don't mind, I'm going to read a bio. But first, I would just like to say welcome, Rachell, to Sage's Ask an Expert.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
So happy to have you. So please allow me to read a little bit to you about the wonderful Rachell. Miss Rachell Hathaway graduated from St. Philip's College with an Associate's of Applied Science and Liberal Arts. She attended the University of the Incarnate Word and obtained her Bachelor of Business Administration with a concentration in finance. Currently, she's working toward a Master's in Public Administration with a certification in Urban and Regional Planning from the University of Texas, San Antonio. Prior to serving in this capacity at Kronkosky, Rachell retired from Bank of America as a Vice President of Community Relations Manager, where she executed national initiatives through the coordination of marketing and public relations projects in multiple cities. We all know how stressful 2020 was, and Rachell also accepted a special assignment in support of the Small Business Administration's Paycheck Protection Program, serving as the executive proxy responsible for over 300 full-time employees and led a team of 20 small business consultants. A few personal things about Rachell. She's a proud mother to 3 college graduates who frequently volunteered with her in the community and still do. Also, she is an author of a book that speaks to so many successes and challenges she had in her life, which I'm sure she'll tell you about today. So please join me in welcoming Rachell Hathaway with Kronkosky. This is an opportunity with Ask an Expert for us to get the information out to you, our audience, and to make sure that you understand the wonderful things that are happening in San Antonio, but also to get a real life person to talk to you about all of those things. And so I'm going to turn it over to Rachell. I know she has an amazing presentation, and please take note that questions will be at the end. So Rachell will go through her presentation. And then if you do have any questions, in case you're gonna forget, make sure that you put that in the chat and we will go through those at the end. So with that being said, welcome, Rachell.
Thank you so much, Tuesday. Good afternoon, everybody. I am so very humbled that you have carved out this time to be with me this afternoon to share my personal passion for philanthropy. I am a San Antonio native, as Tuesday mentioned, and I hail from San Antonio's East Side. I am a graduate of also Sam Houston High School, class of 95. Just have to give a quick shout out there, but wanted to really take the time to share some of the things that have evolved for me personally in the work that I've been doing in philanthropy over the last decade. So as Tuesday mentioned, prior to joining Kronkosky Charitable Foundation as a program manager, I worked for Bank of America as a community relations manager, but that role actually evolved over the years. So I started out in grant administration and doing a lot of information gathering and just learning over the years in the philanthropic space at my time at Bank of America. I'll say what was quite interesting for me in 2020 was the fact that I found myself advocating for national dollars for the local nonprofits that I knew and worked with as I grew up as a child. And I found myself also advocating for family members and friends who are eligible for various nonprofit services in the city. And it was almost an instant realization for me that I was navigating in 2 vastly different spaces. And for me, that fueled something internally to want to do more, specifically for San Antonio, to really try to tap into my own talents and bridge the gap, what I call a great divide between nonprofit funding and nonprofit service. Because overall, we take a great amount of time to figure out what the problems are in our community. And so it's really an opportunity to start the dialogue about how we can do that collaboratively long-term. So 2020 changed me and really connected me with Sage in a way that I thought it was important to share not only my background as being a native of the East Side here in San Antonio, but to share a professional and a personal lens as the two worlds kind of came together for me in 2020. So that being said, I'll share, as you mentioned in my bio, it shares that I am a part of the Kronkosky Charitable Foundation. I come to work with some of the most magnificent people who are showing up each and every day to produce profound good that is tangible and measurable. So if you can imagine being from San Antonio, being from the East Side, and visiting places like Ella Austin when I was young, and knowing that those services were in place because of philanthropy is quite humbling. And to be able to sit in a space with individuals that have over 20 years in philanthropy that have been doing profound good. I know I sent this particular session out to a variety of people, some of my corporate friends, some of my not so corporate friends, and some of my in between. But I really just wanted to have a space to bring us all together, to harmonize in a way that we can really talk about and think about philanthropy and what the future looks like. So if you do know me, if you're in that corporate friend, not so corporate, or in between, and you see this very first bullet here about addressing root causes to solve problems or eliminate needs, that is literally my testimony of life. I feel that that is my purpose. For some reason, I get a kick out of the challenges that I face as an individual. Something about applying that knowledge and the wisdom of my lived experience to philanthropy is invigorating, but it also gives me a different lens into how we can address certain problems or needs within our community, within our cities, and quite honestly, on a broader scale. One thing that I did not share is that working in the space of philanthropy for so long, initially I thought, there's some problem resolution. We have some dollars to invest in the community to help these wonderful nonprofits do big work. But then I thought, how can I learn more? And so I continued my studies in graduate school right now for public administration, and really looking at root causes and doing research about how we can address community needs across a spectrum of public sector as well as private sector collaboration. And the way that we do that through investments, it really opens up a dialogue for looking at the way nonprofits navigate and the way that funders navigate in the space of philanthropy as well. So in my role as a program manager, I typically have the pleasure of sitting with nonprofit organizations who are already in partnership with Kronkosky. Considering it's only a very short time since I've been with this great organization, I've been able to come in with a fresh lens and see the advocacy opportunity, not only from a funder's lens, but from a corporate lens. So bringing in a very business strategic look at how the nonprofits are serving our communities, how the nonprofits are moving the needle on social equity, and basically how they're doing their business. What a lot of people may not even realize is that philanthropy in America generates over $470 billion. I'm gonna just give everybody a moment to grasp that. Over $470 billion in philanthropy. So while philanthropy is also very much from the heart, there is a lot of business acumen needed to do it successfully. So that's what I really want to talk about today, bridging the gap from the ability to serve a business capacity and the ability to serve from an actual empathetic capacity where we are serving the human race. I put up on the screen the Merriam-Webster dictionary definition of philanthropy. Again, I've invited a very diverse group of people here today. And if you know me, I'm fairly definitive. And so something about just clearly having a definition of what philanthropy is was important to me to share with the group today, because sometimes we only look at it in a lens of dollars. And what I really want everyone to kind of take away and understand is that it's collective time, talent, and treasure. So we're going to have to look at the social issues from a lens of not only academic, but social equity. Those are conversations that are happening so much more frequently after the pandemic, where I've heard those things being in philanthropy for several years, but not as prevalent as we saw some of the shifts in conversation after 2020. So again, with the social aspect, we're going to have an environment where it's caring, we're providing hope to those that need it, that can't see it at that moment. We're providing kindness. And then we also have to look on the other side of the table for the social economic piece. We have to have strategy in order to move our businesses, our nonprofits, our lives as individuals forward. We have to be innovative. We have to simply take time to sit back and say, what am I doing well? What could I be doing better? And are there opportunities that I just simply hadn't thought of? And that's the piece right there, the innovation to me, where there's so much opportunity. That for me is the opportunity where we again come together as the collective. My corporate friends, my not so corporate friends, and everything in between. So that's kind of my theme as well. We have to have a social environment that is economically sustainable. And in order to do that in philanthropy, it's going to take funders, and it's going to take nonprofits, and it's going to take individuals having conversations that may be different. It may not be what we had across the table many years ago in philanthropy. We want to really take time to be impactful with our giving, but not just impactful in a way that's measurable, but impactful in a way that's longstanding. We want to look back after a few decades and say, you know what, we've invested in this particular effort, not just an organization, but the effort that is sustainable because it's been evaluated strategically. And we pull the resources together, being not only the dollars, but we pull together our human capital, which is each of us. Each individual on this webinar has an opportunity to give back. You have an opportunity to give back in a way, maybe from your business acumen. It may be from your dollars, which are great. Our nonprofits need them. Our community needs them. But again, we have to start conversations that may not be so comfortable. And I have found myself in a unique situation to be able to see both sides, to see the necessity for nonprofits and partners that invest our time within nonprofits through service to look at the overall business. An opportunity for a nonprofit to say, I want to not only fight for equity in my community, but I want to fight for equity and pay for my staff. It's okay to start having those conversations with funders from a capacity building standpoint. And funders, it's okay to have the conversation with a nonprofit saying, are you thinking about your long-term growth? Are we looking at succession planning for your leadership? These are conversations that, while if I have the best of heart and I want to simply serve as many people as I can, if I don't do that strategically, I may spend a lot of money, a lot of time, and energy in a space that it's not moving forward. Now, I want to be very clear. We have to really think about, I call the starfish story, being aware that moving the tide for one or changing something for one typically will have a ripple effect. And so that one return on investment is something that it won't be measurable just in an economic outcome. We have to think about the environment and the setting if we're allowing conversation and dialogue that is gracious. And so I've been here at Kronkosky Charitable Foundation thinking about how to locally develop and shape the actual lens of philanthropy here in San Antonio, and how we can work with multiple partners across different sectors to really move the tide and make things come to fruition for each and every neighbor that is here in San Antonio. So part of me sharing and wanting to talk about philanthropy, not only from the economic component of it and the business aspect, but I wanted to share the opportunity for everyone to know that you may not always understand the story on the other side of the table. It doesn't lessen the impact of that person's truth, nor does it make you a person who is, I would say, should be looked at in a negative way just because you don't understand. We all have different lenses that we come from. We have different lenses that we view from, and we have the opportunity to learn from other people's lived experiences. It doesn't necessarily mean that we may see eye to eye, but if the long-term sustainable goal can be met by us compromising, then that may be something that we need to look at. I share that to say, part of my philanthropy is very personal. Being in the space for a number of years, I found it very challenging to really open up and share my perspective of how I view the world, and to really share why I viewed the world the way that I did. It wasn't until I had the opportunity to share in a meeting that a nonprofit locally was on my high school campus, and that nonprofit bought me an alarm clock because I was late for school quite often. And that simple gesture shared for me the importance of showing up as an individual. So while on a grand scale, Rachell in a professional space knows that it's important to show up, to be present, to give of myself and time and my talents. Rachell, from my personal lived experience, was not so comfortable doing that. And finding, again, myself in a unique space where I am able to navigate in vastly different environments. I found a way to share my personal story and connect that to the reason that philanthropy drives me as an individual. So my personal story gives other people the option and the opportunity to learn from my lived experiences. You don't have to grow up in a home with domestic violence to know that it must be tough. You don't have to have wealth to know that it might be nice, but you can have conversations and dialogue, and you can say, tell me more about what it is that you've experienced and how I may apply that to my everyday life, how I may apply that to my everyday business. Now, my family will tell you, she is quite the business person where I don't necessarily want to have a Christmas Zoom, Rachell, where we have an agenda, but I found certain aspects of my business and my career that it helps balance me in my day-to-day. So again, I share this to share that in philanthropy, you bring more to the table than you realize, even if you're in a space where you may think that I don't know that I have anything to offer. I don't have a lot of money. I don't have a lot of time, but you do have wisdom. that you can share. It may not be writing a book, a very personal story, but it may be simply allowing time with someone that you can mentor, share an opportunity about how you can share and serve and learn from each other so that that dialogue can start and serve its ripple effect as it does with the starfish. So my website is there. Feel free to explore more, but just wanted to give that lens of why it's important to have empathy and allow a gracious space on either side of the table when we're looking at nonprofit funding, nonprofit service, and nonprofit operations. I do want to share the story that I mentioned earlier about the nonprofit organization that bought me an alarm clock because my senior year in high school, I was late every day, and they thought it was significantly important to share with me that I needed to be there and I need to be on time. This organization is one that I understand in a very personal way. Communities and schools, from my opinion, and you know what, this should have been at the beginning. These opinions are mine. All things mentioned and stated are the opinion of Rachell Hathaway and not of the Kronkosky Charitable Foundation. This is recorded, so I should be okay. But Communities in Schools is an organization that I have benefited from personally as a child, as I mentioned, from them being on my campus. I found that I've lent my voice to this organization because at a time that I didn't think it was significant that they bought me my first alarm clock, the people around the table in the space that I was sitting in did. And because of that, I can speak to communities and schools navigating and nurturing the whole child and implementing some developmental skills by simply being part of the campuses that they serve on. So thank you to Communities and Schools for being there for me in my time of need and for the work that you continue to do. I often think of other nonprofits that I thought would be very beneficial for me as a young lady growing up in an under-resourced neighborhood. And I come across the Lemonade Circle. And the thing about this organization is that I tend to invest my philanthropic dollars, my time, my thought leadership in organizations that I identify with. So philanthropy will not look the same for each individual. It's going to be something that you have to take the time to know what's important to you, let your purpose kind of manifest. And for me, I think it's just important to have the conversation and the dialogue so that the dialogue can spark the curiosity, and the curiosity can in turn feed the passion to take action. And so Communities and Schools and the Lemonade Circle are two organizations that I've, again, invested my voice, my time, my talent, and my dollars to, because I identify with those particular nonprofit organizations. One thing about philanthropy that, again, I think is an opportunity, specifically for individuals. We serve our community in a way that we can change policies. We can change policies in our cities through a lot of different focus areas if we lend our time. Right now, the city of San Antonio has over 30 seats available on their boards and commissions. That's a big opportunity. It's a big opportunity for each of us to say, how can I do more? I know 2020 was rough. We've all gone through things, but we're at a state where we have to recognize that it takes each human to effectively change and move things forward in a positive way. It doesn't have to be a right or wrong, but it has to be a change to move things forward. And so if we're looking at survey, there are several opportunities with the city of San Antonio. I wanted to just provide the website. I wanted to also give kind of the step-by-step instructions on how to get there, because I am that person that if I can give you as much information as possible so that you can create your ripple effect, and I'm happy to do so. So our city needs you. Our city needs your service. Our city needs your time. There are boards in a variety of different areas. So anything from youth services, the Affirmative Action Commission, there are opportunities for you to get involved with our city government in a way that creates lasting changes for the next generation. So some of you may be saying, Rachell, you're talking about all this service, you're talking about philanthropy, you're talking about getting involved. I've never done this. I've never served. I don't know where to start. So I personally know a few folks that have gone through these SA 2020 board game. I've met a few people as I was a panelist, just kind of sharing my personal story. That's what I do. I like to talk and share stories. And so through sharing my personal story, getting involved with the board game, I've learned a lot about board service. Sometimes it may just be somebody on the other end of the phone, like a fabulous LJ that calls you and says, I need you. I know you don't serve on boards, but I need your time, I need your talent. And you just say, okay, because that is what you do. But it can be intimidating. It can be intimidating to start if I've never had service in my experiences throughout life. So SA 2020 is a program that I am familiar with, that I know shares with nonprofits as well as individuals how to get more engaged in their community, and what board service does and sometimes does not look like. So that being said, I want to circle back to this: time, talent, and treasure. And I say your community, but it's really our community. Our community needs us. Our community needs us to do more. Our community needs us to ask why. And our community needs us to continue to convene in platforms that are gracious and safe to think about how we can attract and do more around technology, looking at the social determinants of health. That is one thing that I'm, again, proud about at the Kronkosky Charitable Foundation, working with the Alamo area community network of nonprofit partners that are working together to refer services so that we can know where an individual started, the progress that they're making along the way, and how we can do better to serve. It's a cyclical process of improvement, of progression, but it's going to take all of us. It's going to take all of us to move the needle. It's going to take all of us giving of our time, our talent, and our treasures. And I did promise that I would leave enough time for questions. So I will pause there. Lindsay, do we have any questions in the chat?
We do. So what type of organizations does Kronkosky typically support? Meaning, if I'm a small business, could I possibly receive financial support?
That is a very great question. Now, that information is really going to be best found on our website, which is www.kronkosky.org. However, there is not anything in place currently around small business support. If I got technical, I would say when a nonprofit is served and invested in, there are small businesses that receive the ripple effect, but currently, no, there are not small business grants process in place at Kronkosky Charitable Foundation. Now, again, I'm fairly new to the organization. I know my director is likely listening and will very much correct me if I'm wrong, but currently Kronkosky does focus areas around human services, arts and culture and other programs, mostly around public spaces and like zoos and parks and things of that nature. But I will say, if you are a small business and you're on the SAGE webinar, San Antonio Overgrowth on the East Side does economic development. There are grant opportunities available through SAGE, another nonprofit that works with small businesses specifically as well is Lift Fund here in San Antonio. So while Kronkosky Charitable Foundation has grant and initiative efforts around funding, there are opportunities for small businesses in San Antonio that are targeted specifically around the SBA efforts.
Absolutely. We have another one. Have you ever felt the nonprofits treated your foundation or organization as a transaction versus a relationship?
I'm 90, I don't know if I'm 90 days in, but in my previous role, of course, that I think that's on both sides, though, right? I tend to be very gracious and think of, oh, sometimes I mess up. So if something comes across where it seemed transactional or it seemed less than genuine, I am typically that person that is going to say, oh, they were just having an off day. But there's opportunity for relationships. There are over 6,000 nonprofits registered here in San Antonio. I mean, that does include churches and colleges and things of that nature. But I mean, think about that, the sheer number of organizations that may interact with funders or corporate funders or individuals. That's a large amount of relationships to attempt to build. So I can't fault anyone for something coming across a bit transactional. But yes, of course. I mean, that happens in our day-to-day at the grocery store. But again, I'm that person that probably gets in the elevator like, how is your day? That is a nice guy. No one wants that all the time, and that's okay. And that's again why I express the gracious space. We need to be able to allow that gracious space where if you treated me like it was a transaction one time, that is not your forever. And so I don't hold you to that particular instance.
Excellent advice. One more just shot through. What is your advice for combating imposter syndrome?
Golly, I did that for so many years. Here's the deal. Again, I probably always seemed like the fairy tale person, but I am a harmonizer. I personality profile things, and harmonizer was in my thing, so I own this. But when we're talking about what was the basis
combating imposter syndrome?
We're talking about the imposter syndrome, right? I think of me being a young lady from San Antonio's East Side, being hired at maybe 26 or so into a space where I sat in wealth management. I had no true comprehension of wealth at that time. And so while I may not have presented my full self as an individual, I think that it took me time to learn and understand my environment. It's important for me, and it's going to be an individual thing. Each person's journey is theirs. But for me, learning to be different and be okay with that and be confident in the skin you're in, regardless of the space you're in, is important. So I don't label anyone the imposter syndrome, but what I will say is that I had moments where I had to learn what was comfortable for me in a space that I may not have been comfortable in. And so that's why I call gracious spaces is one thing that we use here at the Kronkosky Charitable Foundation, is just safe spaces looks different for different people. So I don't know if it would be imposter. So I can't say that I would combat it, but I would say that you have to find your medium, find your balance in what works for you.
Absolutely. Kronkosky Foundation requires certain guide star levels for funding, something grassroots-led, BIPOC-led organizations may not know or have that they should. What is being done, if anything, at Kronkosky to make the opportunity for funding available to smaller grassroots organizations?
Oh, just throw it right out there. There are conversations being had. That's a space that internally we have discussed. There's opportunities around philanthropy in general. And so those are some of the conversations that I don't think Kronkosky is the only funder having that conversation. But there are some changes in philanthropy overall. So keep an eye out, stay connected. Specifically for BIPOC smaller organizations, because we want to look at your capacity and your sustainability. If we're having conversations, we also need to think about those conversations in a way they're not defensive. We want to think about how we can actually make both sides better. We want to be strategic about the investments. We want to be strategic about the work that you're doing as well, because when I talk to a nonprofit, I'm not only concerned about your financials, I'm concerned about your financial director and how much time they're spending in the office, because our nonprofits are under-resourced or understaffed. So those are things that the philanthropy space conversation and dialogue is starting to happen. This platform, this is you asking that question was the first step. So we're having the dialogue and we're continuing it.
Awesome. Just a friendly reminder for those, we'd love for you to put your contact information in the chat so that Rachell has a way to contact you or vice versa. We do have one more. Rachell, what inspires you most about this new era of philanthropy coming out of the COVID experience?
Ooh, I think for me, like I mentioned, the pandemic made me realize that, again, I was navigating in two very different spaces, that I was an advocate on both sides. But I think what's most exciting is that we're having conversations that I don't know that we would have had before COVID. I hope that we would. I mean, let me do it one more, or let me go back, because I'll say SA 2020, and one reason that I do sit on their panel and participate in this is because there were organizations having these conversations before the pandemic. Not saying that others weren't, or it's just, the pandemic made it more prevalent. Of course, inequities were surfaced a little bit more. And so it started the dialogue. And I think for me, that's exciting, that philanthropy is taking a step back to say, yes, we're funders, but we're human funders. We're all humans all around the table. One of my favorite professors, Dr. Griffin, I don't know if he's on, but he said something that was so profound to me. He says, systems, technology don't make the change. I'm probably butchering it, but it's the people that create the technology, that implement the processes, that plan and have questions and have the conversation that develop the technology to make the change. So I am just most excited that I am hearing conversations that are a little bit different, that I hadn't heard in several decades. And I'm also excited that I'm starting to see different people in spaces that, myself included, it's one of those things where I hadn't quite anticipated really taking my voice to the masses and saying, we have to come together and we can do this. And let me do you bullet points on how we can do that. But, if I can share my voice, my time, and my talent, as others have invested in me, that's the return on investment. That's the return on philanthropy, and just really hoping that everyone will truly ignite their spirit of philanthropy and find out how you can serve and give yourself.
You are truly inspiring others on this call today. And so I got two questions that were questions/comments that came in. One is, after 20 years with one company, then making a big career move to Kronkosky, where do you see your next career going? And proud of you.
Oh, that is beautiful. If I saw myself here, I could tell you where I see myself in a few years. Admittedly, I do try to plan out 2 to 5 years, but I am at such a fluid space right now in life. So I'm excited to be where I am, and I want to put as much of my time and talent into the work here at Kronkosky Charitable Foundation to keep moving the mission forward. Albert and Bessie Mae Kronkosky entrusted their fortune to do good work in this community. That's very important to be a part of for me. It's very important to know that philanthropy has been here and it will continue to be here. And I'm part of the changes that are coming. That's humbling. So thank you. I am proud of myself, but I'm proud of my community for being at this space that we are now.
And then the other says, great presentation. Thank you for your authenticity and vulnerability. May I ask you to please describe the trends that you see in philanthropy for nonprofits in 2022 and beyond?
Now, trends, I can't say for sure. What I do see in the philanthropic space with private foundations, and you can do a little bit of research here as well, several of them are looking at policy research, looking to change policy. And so I know in some of the conversations that I've had with nonprofits, our nonprofit partners, is, are you looking at that long term? Evaluating your outcomes. If you're not in a space that you can do that, are you able to collaborate with other nonprofits? Of course, as we bring our voices together, we make a wider impact. And so maybe there's an opportunity to look at how we're affecting policy. I know that racial equity right now is very prevalent in the philanthropic space. A lot of nonprofits are looking and seeking funding on how to diversify not only their talent pools, but how to diversify the workforce, how we're workforce development. I think the pandemic has shifted people the way that we're looking at entrepreneurship. Again, there are a lot of different trends that are emerging from the pandemic. I think the medical aspect of research is another area that we're going to see an increase in. So trends are, as such, like the stock market, moves often. And so I don't pay as much attention to the trends. I probably should, but I like to look closely at kind of what philanthropy is doing, what they're researching, because when you're looking at what they're researching, it guides you towards the outcomes that they're already seeing. So typically nothing is new under the sun. There's some things that have come up previously, and there's more data to support it. And because that data is there to support it, then we have the opportunity to address it. So I think the trends kind of move based on how much data we have available.
Awesome, awesome. All right, one final question. How do you recommend beginning the conversation about giving to potential clients, funders, and supporters?
I think that's going to be very different for everyone. Typically, when I want to begin a conversation, I'm curious, so I have a question. I like to set the stage that I don't know more than you. You likely don't know more than me. I don't have all the answers. You likely don't either. And so let's start from a space of what foundation you already have, what foundation that I already have, and come into the space to learn what goals that we have, how can we achieve those goals, and just have the conversation in order to do that. I think with I'm so sorry. I think with conversations, the main thing is to have an open mind, to make sure that when we're beginning to think about how we're going to fund, about how we're going to invest our time, our talent, and our treasure, that we simply think of how it fits into our balance. And, you know, a lot of people will say you can't, there's balance does not exist. And, you know, having children and going to school and working all at the same time, it's a necessity for me. So I would say you'd have to really think about how you want that conversation to go and what it is you want to get from that conversation. But it's definitely an individual space to kind of discover where you want to go with that dialogue and how to begin the conversation. But I say start with questions.
All right. Well, Rachell, this has been wonderful. We are so appreciative, and I'm certain that all the people that had questions are really inspired by your answers. We appreciate your candor, we appreciate your vulnerability, and we appreciate you sharing that wonderful book with us. So we know that there may have been some questions that we may not have gotten to. And so if you wouldn't mind, please put your email, put your question in the chat. And Rachell, can you pull up your page with your contact information again one more time for me?
Absolutely.
Thank you so much. So again, guys, the reason for these talks is so that we can share our community efforts. We can share with you what the leaders in San Antonio are doing. Rachell has been a leader through Bank of America. She is now a leader through Kronkosky, and we know that she's going to continue to do more and more for this community. Rachell, we appreciate you on the east side, but we appreciate you more in the city of San Antonio. Thank you all for being here with us today. We are thankful that you were here to come learn, to get some really good tips, and to understand what other opportunities there are in San Antonio. So with that, please stay healthy, stay strong, and stay Eastside. We appreciate it. Have a wonderful day.